Artificial intelligence is remaking marketing as we speak, and if you're a marketer, you can either get up to speed or get left behind. The choice is yours, and really, it's a no-brainer. Join Jeff Livingston and Greg Verdino as they explore the latest AI news, trends, tools, and ideas that are creating the future of marketing today. This is No Brainer, an AI podcast for marketers. Oh, and just in case you're wondering, yes, I am an AI. Take it away, Jeff and Greg.
Hi, everybody. This is Jeff Livingston, and welcome to the No Brainer podcast. I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Greg Verdino.
Hey, Jeff. How's it going today?
Very good, sir. Good to see you. I like your haircut. You have to be watching on YouTube to get that joke, folks. And speaking of, we are on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere that you get podcasts. Please be sure to follow us. And if you are on iTunes, please give us a rating. We greatly appreciate it. And so with that, let's kick it off. Mr. Greg.
Hello, sir. How are you? So if you've been paying any attention, I'm sure you've seen former Googler Geoffrey Hinton making the rounds. So for those of you who haven't been paying attention, perhaps you're not on the AI hype train the way a lot of other folks are. So Geoffrey Hinton is a gentleman who has been called by many a godfather of AI. There's obviously many different scientists, including many women, but I don't hear anyone calling anyone a godmother of AI. But many scientists, data scientists, AI developers who have been instrumental in building the technologies that have formed the foundation for the large language models that everybody is hyping and buzzing about today. So over the course of the past couple of weeks, one of the big stories has been that this godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, who had previously been employed by Google, put in his resignation. And the reason he chose to resign from Google is he felt it would give him a greater ability to speak about what he's come to see as the existential threat of artificial intelligence. So he's been out on the circuit. And he's not surprising. I think like a lot of AI scientists, I think, has been talking about the long-term implications of essentially sentient AI, or at least artificial general intelligence. Will it run away from us? Is there a potential, which he believed there is, that the AI smarter than a human might, ultimately make a decision to eliminate humankind? Right. A lot of this is hand waviness, right? If you talk to a lot of the AI,
it's the Matrix,
people, right? You talk to the AI ethics people and they're like, why are we worried about some science fiction when the reality is today we have artificial intelligence that's nowhere near human capabilities in most areas, but is full of bias, underrepresents certain markets or certain populations, could potentially result in lots of disinformation, could result in near-term job loss, things like that. Why are we worrying about like some Terminator scenario? But what's really interesting about this is that, obviously because of who he is and the fact that he came out of Google, he's been all over the media. And everyone loves the doomsday story, right?
Right. Like we were talking before, right? And it is a coincidence that it came out right before Google I/O. Right, which is their big AI developer conference. It's this week. I don't know, but go ahead. Good. Let's get through him.
Think what's interesting
before we trash him.
Right. Well, that's where I'm going right now.
Man.
I'm sure he's a very smart man. I'm sure he means well. I know a lot of people involved in the development of AI are concerned about both near and long-term risk. But what to me is interesting and frustrating is you watch the interviews and trust me, the interviewers, right? The, media personalities who are speaking to this guy aren't doing anybody any favors because they're kind of doing the what's an AI kind of, clown show.
Right.
But
plus they like the headline, right? The headline's great for their clicks. I mean, they're benefiting from this just as much as they would say from a certain political person that likes to create very dramatic and somewhat toxic headlines. I don't know who that guy might be, but
I have no idea. But what's frustrating about all of this is he's raising concerns about an issue. And now this is a guy who has been working in artificial intelligence for 30, 40 years, right?
Sure.
And he's kind of soured on it, and it has become sort of an AI doomer. But other than raising the issue, he's not actually offering anything of substance. He's not talking about what he believes is a solution. Like, he doesn't believe in a pause, right? He didn't sign the letter. He doesn't believe a pause makes sense. He doesn't believe it's practical. He's concerned about what happens if, US companies pause. How do you get Chinese companies to pause? They're not going to, right? So he's like, that's not practical. That's not a solution, but he offers no solutions to the challenge, which is interesting, from the perspective of, a prominent voice in the space making a lot of noise about something with really no practical near-term implications or action plan.
Well, on top of it, he's probably locked down on some brutal NDA, which he can't say anything.
Right.
And,
Well, we know that he's being very, I'll say, political,
cautious.
and he's cautious. Any statements he makes about Google, right?
Google's been ethical. Google's been ethical. I've read it.
He's maintaining they've been reasonably responsible. He's grown concerned since they got into the race with Microsoft and OpenAI, but he's not pointing a finger directly back at them. But still, I wouldn't think that would preclude him from having at least an idea to share about how he, with all of this experience, all of this inside knowledge, would approach the issue that he's flagging. But he's not. He's just waving his hands around.
Right. And that's like saying that poverty is terrible and we shouldn't have homeless people without doing anything about it, which is also a very difficult problem that isn't going away. I mean, and even though it's completely different, it's socioeconomic, obviously. The similarities are that they are both problems that are not going to go away, because AI is not going to go away. And there are going to be impacts, some of which we're going to talk about today, including the job loss thing, which is our big focus today, since it seems to be happening a little bit now. And people are stupid afraid about that. And they should be, right? I mean, it's a reasonable fear when you start seeing articles about ChatGPT replacing this, or Audible using AI to read books now, and things like that. So that's a real concern. What isn't helpful, though, is this, what I call the Hollywood meme, the dystopian future. And forgive me, because one of my graduate papers in Georgetown was on dystopian technology memes in Hollywood, and how culturally we use this to create a fear and repress technology in some ways. And to me, I think that what we're seeing is rapid change. People don't like rapid change. And as a result of that, it creates a huge 5-alarm, 7-alarm, 9-alarm fire. And I want to keep the issues, when I talk about it, as reasonable as possible and as fixable as possible. And that includes like retraining people or encouraging people to embrace the tools so they don't get outsourced or replaced, these kinds of issues. So when I hear what he's saying, give me an answer. Give me something to work with. Show me a way. Even if it's Asimov's robotic laws, right? Do something like, other than like, well, the AI will keep us around and keep it running for a while until they figure out how to replace us there too. Okay. Thank you, Neo.
And it is interesting, right? Because was it earlier this year or last year, Blake Lemoine, I'm sure I'm butchering his name, right? But he was another Google AI scientist who, he's the one that came out and said he believed he was seeing signs of sentience in the language model that Google was developing, and was immediately terminated. Right. And, he's another one where, like, really, is the AI really sentient? Are you sure about that? Because it shouldn't be anywhere near that just yet, based on what it is. To a large extent, a lot of people involved deeply in artificial intelligence believe that large language models are in fact an off-ramp from artificial general intelligence, that you're not going to end up at AGI with a large language model, that there are other ways to get there, and this isn't one of them.
But, like, when you think about what really works well with AI, it's usually a narrow application, right? So something very specific. And so when I see these large conversations about ChatGPT ruining the world, it's really how you use it. Maybe if you implement it in a very narrow way. What concerns me most about AI, just to be candid, is military AI. Like, if you actually start, do you remember RoboCop, the new one? Like the one that everybody hated? And you remember the whole premise of that one was that they deployed the robot on the front line in military situations. And to me, like that's much scarier where you have an AI go on rogue in a situation like that. But the reality is I just don't see it happening anytime soon. So we'll see. We'll see. But now
Yeah.
we know one way to lose your job, which is to quit your AI company or work at an AI company and tell everybody how bad AI is.
Right, right. Which, that even goes back to like 2020. Another, it feels like all these Googlers whose names I can't pronounce, like, is it Timrit Gebru?
Yeah.
She made headlines back in 2020 when, she wasn't talking about sci-fi doomsday scenarios. She was a signatory or a co-author of the stochastic parrots paper, right? That keeps coming up. I feel like on every, not the letter, but the original stochastic parrot paper. She co-wrote that with Emily Bender. And simply the fact that she raised issues regarding fairness and bias and the digital divide and whether AI might exacerbate it, simply that got her fired from Google, right? So if nothing else, I suppose speaking out about AI is in fact a way to lose your job, at least in the tech industry. But,
Okay.
you know,
I work at OpenAI. I don't like ChatGPT.
but you know what? Sam Altman says that much, right? He's another one who's gone on the media, has done the press tour, and out of one side of his mouth is talking about how if you don't get aboard the AI train, you're going to be left behind, and that'll be catastrophic for you personally. The other side of his mouth, he's saying, but this is going to be really damaging to society and the economy, and it may bring the end of capitalism. And and then he also goes, but I don't know what to do about it. Who could possibly control this? It's like, I don't know,
Yeah.
Sam. Who do you think?
Yeah. He's definitely a media, shall we say, he likes the limelight. Let's leave it at that before I say something that I will regret. I do think though, it's a good transition point to talk about jobs. Let's talk about like something that can really potentially happen, why it would happen, and what people can do about it. And that's the displacement issue where AI comes in and creates jobs, but maybe your old skill set is no longer relevant.
Yeah, right.
Um,
Because we've certainly seen, you know, some, even just reports, right? Reports, studies, and so forth, from both, academic institutions and for-profit institutions that point to the risk. And these are not brand new. Obviously, for months now, people have been talking about AI's report that was co-written with, I believe, Wharton. Is that correct?
yeah.
Where they,
Out of jobs, right?
yeah, they did a fairly large study of sort of the early impact of generative AI on the labor market and found that 80% or some odd number of, jobs, 80% of jobs will be impacted by generative AI. Impacted by generative AI doesn't mean eliminated by
Disappeared,
generative
right?
AI. But there are a number of jobs that would appear to be so significantly impacted by generative AI that you almost have to assume they would disappear. If you're on a job where, 70, 80, 100% of your task can be substantially accelerated, made more efficient through the use of artificial intelligence, that all of a sudden creates a scenario in which there, quite frankly, isn't enough work for you to do if the size of the company's workforce doesn't change, right?
Classified editor, right? Classic example.
Absolutely.
I definitely see it as a big issue. And I think that what's not helping is the dialogue about it and about AI as this thing that's coming in to replace people's jobs. And I know you've heard this as well, but it's the whole Excel accountant scenario where in 1985, Microsoft deployed Microsoft Excel. Now imagine you're an accountant that says, no, I will never use this tool. I will never use these macros and algorithms. Like you'd be out of a job, right? And then what would happen after QuickBooks came out and then zero, right? And that moved a lot slower than what we're seeing with basically what are people that are communicators, right? People that are marketers or advertisers or designers or photographers, but people that can tell stories. And so these people now feel threatened. What are they doing? They're using the tools they know how to use to complain about it. And I think it's the wrong approach. We've all seen these tools coming into place for a while now. And that's just the truth, right? We've seen them with Grammarly. We've seen it with Photoshop and Illustrator, where you have more and more power built into the software. And so I think what we really need to do is accept that it's coming and lean into it and embrace the tools. And by turning the dialogue from I'm going to get replaced to I have a whole new set of tools that's going to let me be a lot more productive and better and faster. So I'm going to learn them. I think that that's the right way to approach it. Or it's likely that my skill set is going to be commoditized in 2 or 3 years. Let's say you're a content writer for, I don't know, like IBM, right? Like there's got to be like an army of those guys there, right? You may find yourself commoditized by AGI, or you're going to have to write about 10 times the amount of content.
Right.
You decide, this is the time to become.
IBM is a good example, obviously, right? Because, they recently, they might be the first company that actually explicitly
acknowledges
direct, right, the effective AI on their workforce strategy. They're not firing people to replace them with AI. They're simply not filling holes.
Hiring them back. Yeah.
Right. They're looking at a scenario in which they might eliminate 30 some odd thousand jobs for a variety of different reasons. But they do point to the fact that AI may account for 8,000 or so of those jobs. And, they describe these humans as replaceable by AI. Right. And they point to a lot of back office functions. And I don't know whether
that PR, man.
Yeah, I don't know. Right. It's either bad PR or it's good PR, right? It's bad PR.
I guess, if you're right? IBM, then you're eating your own dog food, right?
Right. But at the same time, it's also potentially a very convenient way to kind of shift the focus from we've been operating this company poorly through the boom. And now that there's a bust, not our fault. It's this wave of AI that's coming in that's adding this, like just this layer of efficiency that makes the viability of these positions in our back office so much lower because now we can do them with technology. And so it's almost like, you look at a scenario like that, whether, whatever the real story is, whether it's PR mastery or, or
graphic
not,
design or whatever,
or whatever it is, I guess the angle,
sorry. I thought you were talking skills. I'm like, PR guys replaced by.
It is called PR people for sure. But
thank God. Freaking hot air.
But I wonder, it's a scenario in which it's like almost the jobs don't get eliminated; they become extinct. The jobs never exist. It's a hole that never gets filled. It's and how does that reflect upon the future nature of the workforce, right?
Ask a toll booth worker.
Sure.
Because they've been completely replaced, right? Now they're Easy Pass. So this has happened over and over again. It's a story of technology, right? It's just happening faster and more rapidly and on a larger scale now with this particular wave of technology. And I think, again, the skill set is really like, hey, what are we going to do with this particular technology that we're going to make ourselves useful? Are we going to embrace communications and PR? Are we going to embrace technology instead? Are we going to embrace branding the old fashioned way? Or are we going to say, hey, let's come up with a concept and throw it into a generator and see what comes back and then iterate up from there, And I know you and I had a little side dialogue about that creativity article that I tossed out there, but I think really the market for people that are fearful of losing their job, regardless of which particular segment of the industry they're in, is about learning how to use the tools to become better, right? Like I'm much less focused on, let's say, for example, creating content for social media and much more focused about how I can make a GPT algorithm work within a CRM environment. To me, that's much more interesting because it scales a lot of power and makes things more interesting. What are the ways that I can do that in a manner that creates guidelines so that the content that comes out is decent? There are humans in the loop to approve that content. It gets customized in that kind of one-to-one way that you would love to see AI do, but kind of doesn't seem to really work very well. That kind of thing. That's where to take your mind. You gotta, if you look at the fear side of it, you're going to lose. If you look at it like this is an opportunity, you're going to win.
I think I agree fundamentally with that, but where I struggle, and I feel almost like, I'm trying to think of a politically or a socially appropriate way to say this, because all of the analogies that come to my mind, unfortunately, are mental health analogies. But I'm of two
It
minds,
is Mental
right?
Health Awareness Month, by the way.
And I feel I'm of two minds, and I feel almost like I'm getting whiplash back and forth, right? I believe everything you said, I agree with, and I believe, but then
It's the devil of
also,
the angel.
right, exactly. But also I know that it's neither, it's not realistic for every boat to rise equally, I don't believe, right? And you think about, a scenario in which some people, I agree 100%, some people, the people that embrace this, that embrace the new skills, that take on those new skills, that jettison the old stuff that no longer serves them, the stuff that can be easily automated by machines, and rise to the occasion, are the people who will win. Absolutely, no doubt about it.
100%.
But there isn't a large enough market for 100% of the people to win, right? Like, here's an analogy, right? Because there's a demand side, not just a supply side. So let's say
Right.
you've got 100 customer service reps in your call center, and you've got, let's say, a 20-minute wait time for the telephone, right? That's terrible for everybody. Now, if that call
Right.
center implements AI to make call handling and response to customers more efficient, and you now reduce that call time from 20 minutes to 2 minutes, that's great, and you can probably employ everybody. But if you actually get that to 0 minutes, what that means is you've got a bunch of reps sitting around waiting for the phone to ring. So now you
Right.
might only need 50 of those 100 reps. And now you've got 50 people who, whether they embrace the technology or not, there's just not enough demand for them unless the company doubles its customer service issues, which is not a scenario any company wants. You don't want twice as many complaints, right? And I think about how that might roll out into other areas, right? And there was an article a while back, Dave Matten, who's a sort of technology analyst type. He writes New World, Same Humans. It's a great newsletter, right? And he was thinking about some of this job loss issue. And he was saying, it's one scenario where you, let's say, empower your design department to do design more efficiently and maybe raise the game, right? And actually do design better. And maybe some designers lose their job in that scenario.
But it's because they won't embrace the tools, right? It's
Sure.
the Adobe path where they say, we insist that there's a human in the loop, so to speak, which is the AI slang for that, but that there's humans involved in the creative process that are governing. But if you refuse to use the tools, if you're a Luddite, you're out.
Right. Well, that's undeniable, right? But you've got another factor, which is, let's say you're not a designer, you're a brand manager, and you've got access to that same set of tools. And now it's much easier for you to create a high quality visual output asset, right? And you don't need designers at all anymore. Why not give
You could be a generalist,
right? Give your 10 brand managers the ability to do their own design, which they want to do anyway, and just fire the whole design department, right? So there's all these, this is not, what's interesting about this is it's not about the AI per se, right? In a lot of ways, it's about the inclination that leaders in organizations have to always put efficiency and then ultimately profitability ahead of everything else, right?
Right.
AI can be deployed in a wide variety of ways to benefit people or to harm, right? And as long as there's a mindset of the old model of eke every inch of productivity out of the workforce to eke every bit of profitability out of the business, you're always going to have this tension, right? Where, even if somebody embraces the tools, that doesn't necessarily mean that person is safe, right?
Correct.
And we're going to kind of get into, even, I think, as we go through this podcast, we're going to get into some examples, obviously, of things that are happening in the world right now. It's not just theoretical, right? There are real examples,
right?
We can look at of either job loss or imminent job loss, or concerns that are fundamentally founded.
Right. But one thing about this, and I think that we've seen this happen over the past 15, 20 years with the whole agile lean methodology coming into play, is that we know that there's one thing that's going to happen in business is change. Okay.
Of
And
course.
it's not just technology too, right? Like we've seen it in the past few years, like the CEO at the company I work at, Ravi, always talks about this. Like, we've had COVID, we've had the conflict in Europe, we've had inflation. Now we're having all this fiduciary, shall we say, instability with the small banks, right? On and on and on, major, major business impacts. And, people have had to adapt and adapt and adapt and adapt. I mean, that's why you see businesses using quarterly business plans or even monthly business plans instead of annual business plans. Again, this is a Ravi thing, right? And Ravi's right. That's an agile methodology, right? It's the same thing with this stuff. And I think that that's what kind of kills me about the whole conversation just a bit. And maybe I'm just kind of like beating a dead horse right into the ground. There are examples of it where it's really dangerous. And I know we're, like, as you had said, we are about to talk about those, but I just really think we have to reframe this argument quite a bit. But go ahead. Let's go. Let's get into the meat.
Yeah. So let's start to do a little bit of framing, right? We've been kind of all over the place, kind of riffing and ranting and improvising around all the different angles and the things we're hearing, the seeing and thinking and all of that, right? But, so there was a recent Pew study, and the study found that 62% of Americans think jobs will be, air quotes, majorly impacted by AI, whatever that means, right? But surprisingly, those same people don't believe their own jobs will be significantly impacted by AI. So there's sort of like an other people problem going on here, right? So I guess, the question is like, is this a real worry, right? Do we think that marketing jobs are going to be, kind of on the chopping block? Are knowledge workers going to be majorly impacted? Is it all scaremongering? If it's scaremongering, who actually stands to win, right? Who wins in a world where everyone's afraid AI is going to take their jobs away, right? Is it just a whole bunch of hype? Is it a reality? These are the kinds of things that I think we want to explore. We're going to explore them in the second half of the show today, and we're going to do it right after this commercial break.
Okay, so before we get into this big issue about whether or not AI really has marketing jobs in the crosshairs, let's talk about some of the news that we've seen. We already talked about IBM, right? And IBM saying that they're going to replace a good portion of their population. I think it was 8,000 jobs with AI, or basically not rehire those people. Chegg, I don't know if anybody knows what that company is, but they're basically one of these academic Cliff Notes type of companies, a digital version of that in the modern era. Just show you how old I really am. But, Chegg has basically lost 40% of its market value in a week after the CEO came out and said their business is absolutely getting killed by ChatGPT. Big, big news, right? Like here's basically a disruptor that's just destroyed their market in many ways.
I wonder about that. I don't doubt that AI is having some impact there. I also wonder if that's a little bit of scapegoating. I don't know Chegg all that well. I know, I believe at least, a big piece of their business is textbook rentals. I know they also do other kind of study aids and things like that. I don't know how big the different pieces of the business are, but I know how my 19-year-old college sophomore daughter behaves. And I know semester 1 of freshman year, she bought and rented textbooks. By semester 2, she realized she could get through the entire semester without ever using a textbook. And like, she's not like in gut classes in community colleges. She's, at a legitimate university, right, with a rigorous program, so there might be a factor too that's broader than just AI, which is social cultural change or generational change in the way students study. But
how's that flip phone looking?
Let's give them, let's give them the benefit of the doubt that some impact or some blame belongs to artificial intelligence, right?
But it's also like Silicon Valley Bank blaming the bond crisis. But when you do the postmortem on there, yes, that severely weakened them. But yes, they were horrifically run and did it to themselves, right? I think in that vein too, we've already talked about tech jobs. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 300,000 plus or minus 50. depending on your source, say that these jobs have been lost to efficiency in the year of AI. I mean, obviously you could probably tie one to the other, but then you could also look back at the whole post-COVID boom where there was that hiring spree and everybody took anybody that can get in the door. And then finally, and I think this one is actually really interesting, and that's the Hollywood writers' strike, where they're basically fighting for the rights in advance of the AI wave, which is really smart. I mean, that's very baseball player to do. But I mean, like, hey, we're going to keep our steroids. Let's not get crazy here. But all things aside,
and
that's a huge one.
That's a huge one, right?
You
you probably miss your late night television or
I miss my late night TV.
Right. And we're seeing the real impact and this sort of loggerheads that you have between, skilled, experienced writers who, the best of whom know they can produce a hit product, right? They know they can produce a phenomenal laugh out loud monologue, or they can write a series that becomes, whether it's an award winner or a winner in terms of, public interest and viewership. And, they're sitting there and they're looking at, they're kind of sitting across the table from studio heads who are going, a machine can do it. Right. And they're going, and, there's a clear sort of push and pull between these creative talents that are trying to sort of protect themselves against being sort of diminished or degraded or de-skilled at the hands of technology. And I don't hear them necessarily saying, we're not going to learn Gen AI. I don't hear them saying,
we want to make sure that we keep our jobs, right?
Exactly. And we don't want to be reduced to being gig workers or getting hired for a week instead of a season or, or whatever. Right. And to what extent
isn't that the nature of that business anyway, though? That it's like,
I think that's part of the problem is it over time has increasingly become that way. Now they're essentially, it's being intimated to them that will only accelerate in a way that's not going to benefit them. Right.
And I wonder what the impact of the streamers are on this as well, where now we see this much deeper bench of actors and shows and content that's being consumed, and that the runaway show is not what it used to be, right? When we were back in the day, again, here we go, the old men ranting. Back in our day, like a hit show was 100 episodes, right? That was 5 seasons. Now it's 8 episodes and like a re-up. And that's
and for a show that's particularly popular, right? In the olden days when you had several networks and not 100 different streaming options plus the internet, it was 1/3 of America tuning in, right?
100%. Now, if you get 1/3 of a percent, you're probably in business.
Right. So there's all of those dynamics going on. And you can understand why the people leading studios are putting pressure on the people that work for those studios. But the question becomes, is it, it's almost like business versus creativity in a way, right?
In some ways, yeah. It's also the law of diminishing returns, right? Where you have, like, there's just so much bad content now that they can get away with publishing crap on there and just have their few wins.
Right.
I look at Netflix.
They're like kind of saying,
right.
Yeah, they're saying,
let's just bash. Let's turn this into this is a Netflix hate episode. I freaking hate Netflix. Why am I paying $20 a month for this crap? That's $250 a year. That's like $3,000 in a decade, man. That's nuts for like what? HD, Super HD, UHD on 5 devices of crap. That's what it is. I'm sorry.
This is a different podcast all of a sudden. I guess
I had to do it. I couldn't help myself. But no, I mean, it's a real question though. Like, why is it like, why is all of a sudden, here's a question for you. Let me rephrase this. Why is a show that's written with AGI, that's guided by a human being, that may be really good, suddenly bad?
Well, I don't think the answer is it may not be. As an entertainment property, it may not be. That said,
but it's bad for somebody's job.
Right. We're nowhere near AGI yet. Right. And, I think there's obviously a certain amount of posturing for a studio head to say a machine can write that and expect they're going to get the next Ted Lasso or Succession or whatever. Right. But you're also talking about a group of people who have spent a career building up a competency around storytelling and creativity. And, it's more goes into creating a hit show or a hit song or, a photograph that stands the test of time, right? Than the technical aspects, the words on the page, the notes on the staff, the light on the lens, right? There's a lot more that goes into it that speaks to the human condition, right? And that's a piece of what a skilled creative is expert in. But then also it's the reality that, there is we are in a world, for better or for worse, when you need to earn your keep, right? And if the way you earn your keep is being pulled off the table, the rug is being yanked from under your feet, that's a scary thing, right? And the question then becomes, are these, screenwriters, are they, the canary in the coal mine, right? If you can do it with the writers, can you do it with the directors? If you can do it with the directors, can you do it with the videographers? Can you do it to the editors? What about the actors, right? Deep fakes are quickly becoming quick enough, good enough that will we need Robert De Niro, or do we have a forever Robert De Niro, right? Which is just, he lives in the cloud, right? And if
it's so funny because I've been watching Heat, which is a great movie, by the way. That scene with Pacino and never mind. Let's not go down another rabbit hole.
So that's where, that's where a lot of this stuff becomes really, kind of the real existential crisis, not the, will the robots come and take our jobs, but like, will the man pound us into the ground because and it typically is a he, right? At the top of the studio, right? Right? Who owns leverage here?
But the thing with this that's missing in the equation is what you had just brought up, the creative aspects. And what I mean by that, it's one thing to have the words on paper, but to also write the guidance that goes along with it, like that wink or that wry look or the emotion or the scene setting. When you're dealing with creativity, and this kind of is going to get into our creative episode, maybe this is a little tip off for what's coming. You're going to get from an AGI a baseline average of what it thinks the right answer is. And a human being is not going to run out of cliche. Like, in fact, there are people that spend their time, cinephiles, right, that watch movie after movie after movie to see where somebody ripped off one scene from another, right? Like, for example, Mission Impossible 2, where Tom Cruise jumps out of the building, right? I mean, that's a ripoff of The Last of the Mohicans, where Daniel Day-Lewis jumps out of the waterfall. But if you're not a cinephile, you're not going to understand that. And those are very unusual scenes. What an AI is going to do is just probably provide jumps off building, right? Doesn't have a different take on it. Doesn't have that kind of splash of things coming out, the glass mimicking the water, that kind of thing. It's just completely different. And as a result of it, it just doesn't have the same, tonality to it. Even when it is somebody imitating somebody else's art, it's not art. It's not creative. It's just literally functional crap.
Yeah. Although there's, I'm kind of, again, this is another thing where I've got the devil and the angel, I suppose, because I'm thinking that's absolutely right. Right. And, will the typical person be as engaged, whether it's with a book, a television show, a piece of music, or an ad campaign, if they know it was created by algorithm and it's the kind of the basest of averages of everything else that has ever been created, put together in a way potentially to kind of manipulate your emotions or to drive you to action, probably better than even a human could do, because it is data based in that way. Will that engage an audience, and will people want to connect with and consume that kind of content? On the other hand, there's the, sort of the what's tricky, I think, in a lot of ways is, I think back, I've been speaking about digital transformation for years and the wide variety of technologies that are disrupting marketplaces and creating new opportunities and whatever. And for years, as I spoke about artificial intelligence, I was saying the same thing everybody is saying now, which is AI won't take your job. A person who knows how to work with AI will take your job. I don't know if I originated that, but it certainly predates all the people who are saying it today. But more importantly, when, kind of pressed around, well, what are the jobs or the roles that remain fundamentally human in a world where anything that can be automated will be automated? The first thing to roll off my tongue was typically creativity.
Right.
Yet when ChatGPT appeared and Midjourney appeared and Stable Diffusion appeared and DALL-E 2, right? What's the first thing they're coming for? Creativity. Right? So I think that's
falling down. But are they really creative?
But they're not quite falling. And I think that's the problem. And they've gotten much better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, like even the blog. Yeah. Like the blog I published yesterday, I did a Midjourney or image to open it up, and it took me 5 minutes to do that. I mean, it didn't even take that, I don't think.
Or you had a photo, I think it was in your story. In the middle of the story, it was a picture of a man walking past a storefront.
3 minutes.
Which looked like 98% of all street photography today, right?
Yeah. But that's the thing. It's a cliched image, right? With the guy walking in a light beam. I've taken that shot. It's so easy, right? Like there's nothing special about it. And here's the thing. And this is why it's not art. And I can talk about this as a photographer or really, truly creative. There's no expression. There is no Cartier moment where you have, the decisive moment where you see this guy's face and you're like, oh my God, oh my God, this is such a photo, right?
Right.
So to me, it's just like, okay, the AI is programmed itself that this is the way that scene should look based off of the ones that get the most likes on Instagram. And that's what you get, like regurgitated pop.
Right. Because I mean, that's clearly a limitation to any technology, but certainly artificial intelligence, right? Is that there is no lived experience, right? And there's no sense. It knows what to make. It doesn't know why it makes it, right?
It just knows that this is the probability of success.
Right. So it has, and you talk about when people talk about, certain, the writing assistants.
Right.
Right. That it's math with words. Right. And,
100%.
It's just completing a sentence based on the probabilities that are embedded and, sort of trained into its neural network.
With Wendy Stanford University program children writing, and therefore.
Right. And, the same obviously goes with the visual stuff, right? Where like, it doesn't know why something is emotionally resonant. Why it's
in fact
out.
It guesses that it won't be because it puts out 4 versions, right? And you choose the one you like the most, right? So if you think about that, that's like what a statement that is, right? Like this is our work. Here's 4 possible possibilities. Should we remix it, or do you just want to start all over?
Right.
Yeah. So, but it does get back to the human skill in that getting the good content out of it is prompting. It's like being able to understand how these things work, understanding that it's trying to create a probability image, and then understanding what image you want and how it's most likely your prompt is most likely to provoke that high probability result that you're trying to seek.
Sure.
And that backwards thinking process, like this is how this engine works. So this is how I need to engage with it to get what I want, is what's going to separate a winner.
Yeah. And, I don't believe prompt engineering is a job, but
no, I don't. I don't either. It's I
believe it is a skill. To your example earlier about Excel, I believe fundamentally prompt engineering is a skill that everybody needs to have, at least for now, right? Again, I believe, and I've said this before, that, kind of the fuzziness around what makes for an effective prompt is more a bug than a feature, right? The better these neural networks get in understanding, processing natural language and understanding the intent of that language, the less tricky we're going to need to be in the way we prompt them, which might open the door to a whole new form of prompting. And, so the skill doesn't go away. It's going to have to evolve very quickly.
Evolves.
But these, dopey, 99.9 repeating % of people get it wrong. Here are my surefire ways to become a zillionaire with prompting. Buy my course. That's all crap, right? But
we're going to see a lot of that. We're going to see a lot of that.
Of course. but you do need to build up your skill set and understand how to work with these machines, right? Those are the people that will replace the people that don't, that's for sure.
Right.
But I also wonder, and to a large extent, though, is that de-skilling the creative or de-skilling the knowledge worker, where, somebody has spent years training under the best in the business, learning how to be a great strategist, a great artist, a great writer, or whatever. They went through years of education for it. They've toiled away, worked until midnight in the bowels of some crappy ad agency, pumping out cigarette ads or whatever the hell they were forced to do as a junior creative. And now they're told, well, actually, no, it's really all about the prompting. You're a babysitter for a machine now.
Yeah.
Is that better?
It's all going to be based on the way you like things. I mean, there are going to be markets for artisans, if you would, I believe, where they do it the old fashioned way, just like we see in almost every type of technology or thing that's been wiped out, right? Like, look at vinyl records. Yeah, I think we've had that dialogue before. But, that's just a great example of that. You see that even with clothing, hand stitched. That's such a luxury on Savile Row and that kind of thinking. So getting things machined versus getting them handmade is always a little context. And those that are artists and are good are going to be able to do it the old fashioned way. But generally speaking, advertising is not about art.
Right. That's
art
the tricky part,
art,
right? Like,
a lot of people think it is. Art is part of it, but it's really ultimately about selling. And when it comes to selling, businesses will always, as you have noted, will always choose profitability because it's ROI. Nobody advertises to, put up a pretty picture, right? Like, this is all about selling Versace. It's about selling, cars. It's about selling lawn services at the micro level with the bad AGI leaflet that's left on your door, but it's still about selling lawn services. So, I don't know. I mean, I think one thing that, you wanted me to make sure we did talk about is this kind of macro view of, all right, so I am that babysitter for the machine. Am I now thinking of myself as an architect, or am I a demand gen pro? Or am I somebody that prompts the probability engine to provoke the most leads? Am I an SDR, or am I somebody that guides outreach to ensure the most amount of touches with the highest probability of success? These types of things where you're not necessarily the creator, but you're making sure everything's working right. You're minding the engine. You're really the guy or the gal that's in the engine room, making sure everything's moving smoothly and that there are no red alerts going on and there's no quality issues. And unfortunately, I think maybe there's some loss of pride of ownership that comes with that. But yeah, that's the way it's going. That's the way we have to think of it.
Yeah. I think the other opportunity, potentially, the other direction this maybe goes for some people, you've used the word generalist. Maybe that's the right word. Maybe it's not the right word, but I think it's the person, the marketer, since, to speak to our audience, who understands how all the moving parts fit together. And I think there's an element of generalism in that, but also that are able to kind of glean the uncommon insights that aren't necessarily evident in data, right? Machines are really, really good at finding patterns in data. Humans are terrible at that, right? Give us a million data points. We're never going to find the hidden patterns. And that's why, let's say, an AI that's trained to identify breast cancer or other kinds of cancerous tumors can do a better job than the human eye because they're able to identify essentially unseen patterns in the data, right? And that's far more important and impressive than, can I con somebody into clicking on this ad? But obviously, the softer stuff of not understanding now, how do I tell the patient, right? That's something that is a uniquely human competency, right? And so what are the equivalents of that in marketing, right? It's being able to identify the truly new, the things that have never been done before, find an
The
insight,
unique.
right? An insight that's not readily available in data, but your gut just tells you this is the right way to go. Or the ability to recognize that the past is not a predictor of the future and that the world is going in an unforeseen different direction. And let's say shift our value proposition or our positioning to get ahead of that, right? So it's sort of like, it's almost like the strategist on steroids, in the same way that it might also be the uber ultra creative who's just is a genius at coming up with out of the box ideas, right? So there is an opportunity, I believe, for these people who kind of rise above to differentiate themselves even more in the face of automation, but it's not going to be an easy path, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think to some extent, like really, let me take a little story angle with this. One of my favorite stories that I've ever read. I love science fiction. Loved it. Read Asimov, Heinlein, and there was a recent series that was deployed on Apple, which I don't think did that well. It was the Foundation series featuring Isaac Asimov. Right. The thing about the Foundation series was this guy Harry Seldon. I'm not sure, Henry or Harry, predicted the entire future of history using an algorithm. His foundation, right? And Ford, the foundation was all about making sure that the order of history was held in place. And then the book, I think was the second foundation, there was a character called the Mule, who's basically an outlier that blows up the whole thing, just destroys it, that the entire algorithm can never predict coming along. And it just changes the entire course of history. Just one guy showing up with just one random approach to everything. And the reality is that in every field and in every way, that person that has that outlier point of view is going to stand out. And they're going to be very, very successful. And that is particularly true in our field where uniqueness creates separation and separation creates opportunity.
Nice. That's a soundbite, my friend. That is a soundbite.
Ooh, I'm like Tigley.
I sat down, my friend. Why don't we, I feel like we've been hitting this for a while now. Why don't we kind of get into our brainer and no brainer? And I think we were going to take maybe a little bit of a point counterpoint. And I think both are true. You know, the
Right.
brainer, the thing to realize, the thing to take away, the thing to kind of pull from everything we've been yapping about. I think for better or for worse, yes, marketers should be concerned about the speed at which AI is advancing and the ways in which AI will impact our job. I'm not saying we should be despondent. I'm not saying we should just lay back and let it roll right over us. I'm not saying that there is no upside, that there is no opportunity, that there isn't a place for winners in this world. We've been talking about the winners, right? There'll be the people who embrace the tools to do the workaday job of a marketer better, more efficient, faster, etc., potentially focus their time on higher order work. And then there will also be a tremendous opportunity for the outliers that we're talking about here. But I do believe that in the near term, there is going to be a fair amount of pain. I think we're going to see agencies and client side marketing departments reduce staff using the excuse that AI allows us to be that much more efficient. I think it will probably drive talent out of the market. I think it will probably result in a semi-permanent reduction in the overarching marketing workforce, less job opportunity. And I think we will recover at some point. The technology is moving too quickly, and too many business leaders are bought into the narrative that this can make us more efficient and more profitable, that I think the gap between the jobs that come in the future and the jobs that are lost today will be large enough that a lot of people are going to really feel a lot of pain.
Ooh, that's hard to follow up with that. Oh, don't worry. Smile. Be happy. Thanks for that. I see how you set this thing up. So the no-brainer, I would say is, well, first of all, let me respond to that brainer in the sense that, yeah, there are going to be companies that are going to totally can everybody go with AI or just have like one poor intern running the AI, and they're going to fail. They're going to lose market position. They're not going to take top spot. And I think that people should feel comfortable that the brands that value creativity, if you have one of them, if you work for one of them, stay there, do everything you can to stay there because they're going to succeed. And we know this. There's the Apples of the world. There are the Virgins of the world. There's, the Ralph Laurents in the fashion industry, on and on and on. There's always these brands that value a unique, creative look, whichever. I don't know if Ralph Laurent's really that good, but you know what I mean? It's just, they stay put. The no-brainer, though, is you do have to pay attention to this stuff. Everybody's back in university now. There is no expert, right? And I think you and I talk about that a lot. So we have to have this agile attitude. Don't be stupid. Don't stick your heels in the sand or in the dirt and refuse to get on the train because basically you're going to get dragged or you're going to just get thrown off the train. And the real trick is to be agile and to play with the tools as much as you possibly can. Like one of the things that I've been painfully remiss on is I have not played with Auto GPT yet. And I think I want to do that because I just want to see how it works, right? I want to have that education. And this is what we have to really talk about. It's important to train up. It's important to understand where your area of expertise as a human is that no bot can replace, and then to augment yourself almost like a kind of like a virtual cyborg with the tools to become even better at that one thing that you're great at.
Nice.
That's a no-brainer.
So to me, that sounds like the future is not preordained. It can go either way. It's what we make of it. And you need to do the right thing, I guess, to paraphrase or steal from, even worse, a creative genius, Spike Lee, right? Do the right thing, which I suppose people are doing to some extent if they're tuning into our
shoes.
If they're tuning into our gibberish and listening to us kind of hash this stuff out and thinking about it for themselves. And that brings us to the end of this show. So No Brainer, as we announced last week, is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. We are proud to be a member of the network. Thank you to the MPN sponsors, advertisers who support this show and all the other shows on the network. As Geoff said at the outset, if you are a YouTube viewer, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave us comments, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe or follow on Apple, on Spotify, or any place else that you listen to your podcast. Be sure to give us a rating or a review there as well. Again, if you
5 stars only,
5 or 6, let's make it a good old Mid-Journey hand of support. But do show your support. We do want your honest feedback. We'd love to hear what you're thinking, and we'd love to know that if you enjoy what we do, that you will do our job, frankly, and help others find us so that they can enjoy what we're doing as well. Last but not least, show notes with all of the resources, links, gibberish, and chapters, and all the good stuff to help you find your way around this program can always be found at nobrainerpodcast.com. You can also email us at hello@nobrainerpodcast.com if you have questions, suggestions, complaints, or simply want to know what Geoff is wearing tomorrow. So
black t-shirt.
It's pretty easy to know. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I enjoyed the conversation, Geoff.
I always enjoy talking with you, Greg. Always.
And we're gonna stop talking to each other right now, at least for a little bit. Back in a couple of weeks with another episode. We will see you next time on No Brainer.
Have a great week.